Notice is hereby given of the regular meeting of the Board of Education of the Town of Westfield in the County of Union, New Jersey at 7:30 p.m. on the evening of Tuesday, September 29, 2015, in the boardroom of the Administration Building, 302 Elm Street, Westfield, New Jersey. The purpose of the meeting is to transact the regular business of the board and to transact any other business that may properly come before the board. This is to advise the general public and to instruct that it be recorded in the minutes that in compliance with Chapter 231 of the Public Laws of 1975 entitled the Open Public Meetings Act, the Westfield School Board on Friday, September 25th, 2015, caused to be posted at the office of the Board of Education located at 302 Elm Street, Westfield, New Jersey, and delivered to the Westfield Leader, the Star Ledger, the Westfield Library, the Town Clerk of Westfield, Tap into Westfield, and Patch.com, a meeting notice setting forth the time, date, and location of this meeting. Dana, could you do a roll call?
Richard Matesic.
Here.
Lucy Biegler. Mark Friedman.
Here.
Brendan Galligan.
Here.
Chris Langhart.
Here.
Ginny Legg.
Here.
Gretchen Olig.
Here.
Peggy Astor.
Here.
Mitch Slater.
Thank you. Gretchen, could you lead us in the flag salute?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, announcements. Peggy, anything down your end?
I have one announcement. Tonight, I'd like to send out congratulations to Westfield High School senior Claudia Savikis, whose artwork was selected for the program cover of the Musical Club of Westfield Centennial Concert. Claudia, who has been an art student of Anna Happy Conway for 3 years, will receive a $200 prize for her award-winning poster. The club is celebrating their 100th year this year with a scholarship concert on Sunday, November 22nd at the First Baptist Church, 170 Elm Street. It is open to the public with a $15 suggested donation. The club was founded in 1915. The Musical Club of Westfield has been bestowing scholarships to promising young musicians since 1922 and has helped over 140 different students over the past 93 years.
Thank you. Brendan?
Two announcements tonight. On Monday, October 5th at 7 p.m. at the Edison Intermediate School, the Junior League of Elizabeth Plainfield and the Tuesday Club will co-host a program on raising resilient girls, presented by Simone Marion, Executive Director and co-founder of the internationally recognized Girls Leadership. Her presentation, which is open to the public, will cover the development of girl dynamics beginning in preschool through high school years. This presentation for parents, teachers, this presentation for parents and teachers will focus on how to help girls practice assertive self-expression, emotional intelligence, and healthy relationships, preparing them for a life of personal and societal leadership. Attendees will have the opportunity to learn how and why girls of all ages are aggressive with one another, the importance of emotional intelligence for healthy conflict, the role of mistakes and the limitations of blame, the concept of contribution, as well as establishing a road for healthy conflict. The 1-hour program will be followed by a 30-minute Q&A session. To reserve for the event, which is being co-sponsored by the Junior League of Elizabeth and Plainfield and the Tuesday Club, please visit rrgedison.eventbrite.com. And for the second announcement, the Westfield Public School District is providing senior citizens a Golden Pass to Westfield residents 65 years and older who attend our events for free. The pass will include Westfield High School concerts, musicals, matinee performances of plays. The pass will also be accepted at athletic events. The Golden Pass can be obtained from the business office of the Westfield Board of Education, located on the first floor of 302 Elm Street, as of October 1st. We welcome our senior citizens and thank them for their years of support.
Thank you. Mark?
The Westfield High School girls volleyball team is sponsoring its 7th annual volleyball tournament known as Pink Out on Friday, October 2nd to raise funds and promote public awareness as National Breast Cancer Awareness Month begins in October. The freshman game against neighbor and rival Scotch Plains High School begins at 4 p.m., the JV game at 5:30 p.m., and the varsity game at approximately 7 p.m. A serving contest will be held after the JV game, and winners will receive prizes donated from local merchants. There'll also be a refreshment stand and a tricky tray auction for baskets of prizes. In addition, breast cancer survivors will be honored in a special procession led by Coach Tark, a breast cancer survivor, at the conclusion of the event. The event is open to the public and tickets can be purchased at the door. Anyone wearing pink is admitted free. All proceeds will go to the Susan G. Komen Foundation. Last year's event raised an incredible $40,000.
Thank you. Chris?
Yes. The board would like to congratulate the Westfield High School Marching Band. They brought home top honors from their first two competitions of the 2015 season. The Marching Blue Devils, comprised of over 100 performing students, placed first in their division and second overall at the Scotch Plains competition held on September 19th, and first in their division and first overall at the Piscataway competition held on September 26th. This year's production is titled The Caged Bird Sings, based on the poem written by Maya Angelou, featuring the sights and sounds of birds accompanied by large bird cages scattered across the football field. The Marching Blue Devils can be seen in action at the next Westfield High School home football game on Saturday, October 3rd, beginning at 2 p.m. at Keller Stadium, where they will host special guests, 7th and 8th grade musicians from Roosevelt and Edison Intermediate Schools for their halftime performance.
Thank you. Jean?
Yes, I have announcements from Westfield High School. Congratulations to the following students who received perfect scores on the ACT test administered in April 2015. Brian Lawrence for Mathematics and Science, Eric Swanson for Reading and Science, and Evan Trott for English. In addition, we offer congratulations to the following students for achieving perfect SAT scores in May. Natalia Zeller McLean for Spanish, Kayla Derman for Math 2, Jack Fico for Math 2 and U.S. History, Frank Anthony Guerriero for Math, and Kevin Palmer for Math 2. Both the ACT and SAT are widely used for college admission criteria, and may I add my personal congratulations.
Thank you. Becky?
I have two announcements. First, congratulations to the Westfield High School Theater Program, which was named one of the brightest in the country, according to Chris Peterson, who's the editor of the online review On Stage. Peterson states, high schools in close proximity to New York City are almost expected to have strong performing arts programs, but teacher Dan Devlin and the students at Westfield High School in Westfield, New Jersey are taking it to a whole other level. Just 40 minutes from Broadway, Mr. Devlin and his students aren't just producing some of the best high school theater in the country. What makes this program so special? First is the approach they have towards educating their students. They instill the philosophy that the performing arts develop numerous skills for the individual, including self-confidence, creativity, analytical thinking, empathy, discipline, and an appreciation for our culture and our history. Their mission is to help every student reach their highest potential as an artist and as an individual. In his review, Peterson also mentions the long list of awards our program has received. He also states that thanks to the amazing introduction to theater that students are receiving in Westfield, many of them are going on to the best college programs in the country. He ended the review by saying, our deepest congratulations to Westfield High School's theater department, and we wish them nothing but the best with their upcoming production of The Cherry Orchard, a high school taking on Chekhov. Love it. The next Board of Education meeting will be held Tuesday, October 6th at 7:30 p.m. A complete agenda will be available on the board's website and at 302 Elm Street on Friday, October 2nd. That's it.
All right, our last announcement relates to the recognition of National Merit Semi-Finalists. I'd like to do that from the podium. All right. Tonight, we recognize 4 Westfield High School seniors who were named National Merit Semi-Finalists for 2016. This designation is a result of a competition by the National Merit Scholarship Corporation, a nonprofit organization. The National Merit Scholarship Program used the preliminary SAT test to screen more than 1.5 million juniors. Approximately 1.1% qualify as National Merit Semi-Finalists. They are among the highest scoring entrants and are eligible to apply for National Merit Scholarships. The program is in its 61st year of honoring students who show exceptional academic ability and potential for success in rigorous college studies. As you can imagine, our 4 students are very high-achieving individuals. So let me tell you just a little bit about each of these National Merit semifinalists. And if you would please come to the podium when I call your name. First, we have Albert Chen. Albert Chen has earned perfect SAT scores in critical reading, writing, biology, math 2, and U.S. history. He has received the grade of 5, which is the highest possible, on the 6 AP exams he has taken to date. Additionally, Albert has been successful in maintaining an outstanding GPA of over 4.0 at Westfield High School. Outside of academics, Albert shows a passion for music as a member of our marching and jazz bands. Last winter, Albert was selected for the New Jersey All-State Symphonic Band. Congratulations, Albert. Ryan Dang is next. With a GPA also above 4.0 at Westfield High School, Ryan Dang also has achieved a perfect SAT score in Math 2. Additionally, Ryan has earned the top grade of 5 on the 3 AP exams that he has taken to date. Ryan has been an active member of the Westfield High School tennis team since he entered our high school as a 10th grader. Congratulations, Ryan. Next, we have Nova Chi. Congratulations. Nova maintains an exceptional GPA average, also above 4.0 at Westfield High School, and has earned a perfect score on the SAT critical reading section. Nova also is an incredibly dedicated member of the Westfield High School marching band, earning the title of section leader during her junior year. She received a top score of 5 on the following AP exams: biology, calculus BC, and computer science. Out of the highest possible score of 800, she scored 750 on the math level 2 and biology SAT subject tests, and 790 on the math section of the SAT. Congratulations. And next we have Sarah Steiner. Sarah Steiner also maintains an excellent academic GPA, which is also above 4.0 at Westfield High School, and has challenged herself with AP and honor courses in all disciplines. Sarah earned a top score of 800 on the chemistry SAT subject test in the 10th grade. She achieved the highest score of 5 on both her chemistry and Spanish language and culture AP tests. Sarah is an avid lover of science and spends her free time horseback riding. Congratulations, Sarah. Great job. I just want to say congratulations to all of you. Thank you for coming this evening and providing us the opportunity to recognize all of you for what are truly outstanding academic achievements. Thank you.
Good company, Rich.
Maybe it'll rub off.
Thanks, everyone. Great job. All right. With that, I would recognize the public for agenda items only. And you're all welcome to leave. You're welcome to stay, but I know what I would do.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Yeah, covering all the diverse subjects.
Okay. Seeing no one come to the podium? Oh, I'm sorry. Apologize.
Perfectly all right.
If you would just state your name and address for the record. Thank you.
Feels like old home week. My name is Marie Koch. I am a former employee of the Westfield Public Schools, currently residing at 531 Washington Street. For the record, I just would like to let the board and the committees, respective committees, know that I'd like to table any comment at this point, but I am here regarding the decision on the lights to Kaler Field. Thank you.
Sure. So anyone with comments on Keeler lighting, you're welcome to hold those comments until after our presentation. Of course, you're welcome to make them now. All right. Seeing no one else come to the podium, we'll move to the superintendent's report.
All right, thank you. And tonight we have, I have two reports to give. We just saw some of our current seniors. I'm going to speak a bit about the class that graduated last June. So it was actually June 23rd last year where we had graduation. And on that day, we had 444 seniors who received their diplomas at graduation. We had another 2 seniors who needed to complete some work, had to work a bit over the summer in order to prove they had reached all of the qualifications, but those 2 students also were able to receive their diplomas by the end of the summer. So out of the seniors attending Westfield High School last year, 100% of those seniors were able to be graduated from high school, which is something we always strive for, but honestly, maybe not always attained. We're very happy that 100% of our seniors graduated. Out of that class, out of Westfield High School class of 2015, 97% continued their education in some way. The vast majority of those students, 89%, are now attending 4-year colleges or universities. There are another 6.7% who attend 2-year colleges right now, and another just over 1% who are attending either vocational or business or other pretty specific post-high school institutions because of what their career intentions are. Out of the rest of the students, we have some students who are involved in apprentice programs specific to items like plumbing or being an electrician. Some have gone directly into employment. Some have taken a gap year. Most of those people intending on attending university the following year. Some are in transition programs, and there are a few whose future plans are unreported at this time. Out of the students who attended the colleges and universities, we had students who are now attending 178 different colleges and universities. That is a lot wider number of colleges and universities than used to be. I mean, if you go back a few decades, it was a pretty small group of colleges and universities that students would consider and go to. And it has continuously grown, and this, we believe, is the largest number. As far as we can determine, 178 different colleges and universities, we believe, is the largest number and the widest variety. Those institutions are in 33 different states, and they're also in 5 countries, including New Zealand, which I never thought of going to university in New Zealand. But really, when you get right down to it, it's a great idea. So, this chart on the PowerPoint right now just shows you the ones where we have multiple students going. So the most popular universities include Rutgers, Penn State, University of Maryland, College of New Jersey, University of Pittsburgh, Virginia Tech, University of Delaware, Syracuse, Lehigh, and University of South Carolina. Some of those you will see from year to year, popular ones, and a few others are a more recent trend. And For the class of the Westfield High School class of 2015, we have students who are now attending Harvard, Princeton, Columbia, Cornell, Dartmouth, and University of Pennsylvania. So we're well represented in the Ivies. We certainly, as we congratulate these students for how well they are doing, we also wish them well. College and university and going to work after high school and being an apprentice, they're all challenges. So we wish them well. We hope they keep us informed of how they're doing and how well we prepared them. If they have any suggestions, we hope they reach out to us because we like to continue to learn, and our goal is to make sure that all of our students are prepared for their future, be it college or career. So we hope to hear from them, but we're glad that they're off to such a great start at this point. Go ahead.
Any questions? I just have one quick one on the, given that this year seems to be the most diverse in number of colleges, do you know if, I know we do a lot of things for seniors to attract colleges to come here, so we have senior night or college night, and I believe that's put on by Guidance. They do a great job. Do you know if those things are now more diverse themselves? I mean, does this sort of perpetuate itself?
They are, not coincidentally. Last year, we had the largest numbers of colleges and universities attend that college night.
Okay.
Additionally, we have made a push over the last several years, actually, to have our counselors become familiar with colleges maybe outside our comfort zone. So a counselor would go to, what the colleges do is they have one area you would go to. It may be the colleges in Pittsburgh, it may be the colleges in Connecticut, whatever, they go to those colleges and universities and learn a bit more about them, and the counselors get to make connections as well as learn what makes those colleges preferred for some students, depending on the students' needs.
That's great. Thank you.
The second, my second presentation tonight is on both the district goals and also the board goals. Now, these were already developed last year, but over the summer we worked to flesh out a bit how these goals are going to be worked on and developed. So the first goal is a bit of a change for us in the district. We're looking to fund and hire a director of development in the district who initially will focus on coordinating our alumni. We certainly have tens of thousands of alumni, and we've talked about this for years, reaching out to them, learning, as I said, about what can we do to better prepare, and also maybe to benefit from the careers, et cetera, and the experiences of our alumni. So as you can see on the action plan, which is listed there, we've been spending some time already looking into what does this position look like in various schools. We've looked at both other public school districts and also private schools to get a sense of what this should look like. This is different and new for us, so we decided we'd really benefit from an advisory committee. Both Peggy Oster and Chris Langhart have agreed to be on this committee, an advisory committee which will be meeting in the near future. And we've also reached out to a few alumni who represent different fields and different decades of attending Westfield High School, just to hear their thoughts about how could we do this, what's the best way to reach out to our alumni and to learn from them. We're also going to use the process that this board learned in a workshop last year about determining when we have something new that we're working on, getting guidance from the board, what do we mean by this position? So we're going to use the guiding principle process to have the board agree in a workshop in October. What is it we want from this position? What don't we want? And what are some areas where perhaps we can use some judgment regarding that? So we'll have that workshop on October 20th, and that'll help us as we go forward. And as the advisory committee will also help us as we go forward. And then if we want to have this position, we have to think about it pretty early because we have to consider that as part of a budget. Will we be able to do that? And if so, how will we be able to do that? How will we define the job description so that we fill it with someone who really will address this and it will benefit the district, which is the whole point. The whole point is how will this benefit our current students by working with our alumni. So that is the tentative plan for District Goal 1, the first goal. I can pause if there are questions on that, or I can move on to Goal 2. And moving on to Goal 2. Goal 2 talks about conducting an assessment review and recommendations for course offerings in the district. Those of you who regularly pay attention to board meetings know that work on this has started. The curriculum committee of the board has already met with Maureen Mazaris, who has been starting some work at the high school level. That work will continue, and that's part of this goal. And actually, Maureen Mazaris will be coming to a board workshop in November to talk about progress on that. But as we talked about this district goal at the end of last year, the board very much wanted to extend this to some extent at both the intermediate level and the elementary level. So Paul Pinero, our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum, has really worked on this. How are we going to expand this to the other levels? At the intermediate level, we're going to look at the electives that are available there, and also the special programs for gifted students and basic skills students, and make some recommendations as far as that goes. And it's somewhat similar at the elementary level. We'll also be looking at gifted and basic skills, but also looking at the time allotments. Elementary school is such a different world. Generally, the students have one teacher all day, and how do we make sure those time allotments are equitable across schools, and how do we make changes across grades that are appropriate? So that is an ambitious goal, working at all three levels of the school district. Speaking of ambitious goals, there's Goal 3. Goal 3, amazingly, it's time again to look at a new strategic plan, to develop a new strategic plan. And when we do this, we always want to involve people out even broader than the Board of Education. The Board of Education is elected by the community and certainly represents the community. However, to develop a strategic plan, we want representatives from our staff, and we want representatives from the community who do not sit on the board. So we have worked over the summer to determine a plan to have someone come to work with us to help with the process of the strategic plan, and we will be starting a process to get representation from across the community to serve on a committee that will receive information about our current data as a district, and then to meet on 2 full Saturdays with the board, with a consultant, to flesh out what do we think is important going forward, what do we think are areas where we should really focus our efforts over the next 5 years. That committee gives us 5 broad focus areas. They don't have to determine every little piece of it, they don't have to be educators, but what is important going forward as you look towards, amazingly, 2020. They'll give us those broad areas, and then the steps in the action plan after that talk about, after they give us that information, I come back here and work with administrators to determine how do we flesh that out and how do we come up with a strategic plan that can guide us for the next 5 years. It's important work. We have to keep on working to make sure that our work is relevant, and as the world changes, we have to make sure that we're preparing students for those changes as best as we can. So again, another goal that will take a great deal of work, but I think very important to help guide us going forward. So those are the 3 district goals. The board also defined goals for their own workings, so they're entitled board goals. And I can either review them or... So the first board goal talks about the board members enhancing their participation in district and community events. So certainly a main focus of their role is to all of these board meetings and board workshops and board training, and that takes up a great deal of time. But then what's also important, as discussed by board members, is going to the PTO meetings, relating what's happened at the board table or what's being considered at the board table to get input, and then also to listen to concerns from the people at the various meetings. It's not limited to PTO meetings. People at this table participate in a number of different committees throughout the community, and to keep that communication going with other groups in the community is really very helpful. So this goal focuses on us continuing to do that. And the second board goal talks to this board works not only as a board at this table, but they also have committees who focus on certain areas. And as you can imagine, it's really important that a committee communicates effectively with the rest of the board. So it talks about the committee submitting notes when appropriate to the other board members, or as another alternative, speaking at the board table, and there are opportunities to say when the facilities committee met last time or when the policy committee met last time, to share that information at the table so that the other board members are aware of the work taking place in those separate committees.
Thank you.
Can I just ask one question about the strategic plan community committee?
Yes.
For the community committee, are we going to ask people to step forward from the community, or are we going to reach out to people, or have we not decided?
So generally, we reach out. We try to come up with almost a matrix. We want to make sure we have representation from all neighborhoods or basic neighborhoods or school areas. Often we ask board members if they have suggestions for people. We're also asking staff members to do that. If somebody in the community is really interested in that, they can certainly send a note to me. They can send an email. They can call my office and explain that they're interested. And then again, we try to piece it together so that we have as good representation as we can.
Anyone else? Anything else, Dr. Dole?
No, that's it for now.
Then I would ask the board to approve the minutes of the board meeting held on September 1, 2015, and the private minutes of September 1, 2015. Could I have a second? Jenny, thank you. Any comments or questions on the minutes? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. That brings us to personnel. Mark?
I'd like the board to consider personnel items 1 through 29. Second, Ginny, thank you.
I think we had 3 addendums, so we're
Oh.
at 32 now.
32, as I don't see that here.
I don't have that.
Oh, here we go. I'm sorry. So I'm going to rephrase that for you, Dana, or are you okay?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Ginny needs to second, okay. Any
Amended.
questions? Dana,
Rich
please.
McKessick,
Yes.
Mark Friedman,
Yes.
Brendan Galligan,
Yes.
Chris Langhart.
Yes.
Ginny Light,
Yes.
Gretchen Oleg,
Yes, I abstain from
Right, aye.
item 29.
and Peggy Aster.
Yes.
Anything else, Mark?
No.
All right, that brings us to facilities. We do have a lengthy Keeler Light presentation tonight. I'll just take a minute and comment on our last facilities committee. That was on September 18th. The primary topic of conversation was solar. So solar on the various schools. This is a project that began probably 4, 5, 6 years ago. Was interrupted due to the fact that we really couldn't put solar on our roofs, having realized what poor shape the roofs were in, and that was sort of a good outcome, if you will, of the solar project. We really learned a lot about the roofs, and the town was kind enough to approve a bond referendum for redoing the roofs. We can now take advantage of that to produce energy savings through solar. So we are going to put out an RFP for solar. We anticipate sending that out in October, and if all goes as planned, the hope is that we have a project for the board to approve at our December meeting. The other item that we discussed was the bond, a potential for a future bond. The Finance Committee is talking about the bond and timing. From a facilities perspective, our concern is that the bond fund what we have identified and previously discussed as priority 1 items. So sort of those things that are imminently failing within the schools that we know we need to replace. And that is the primary component of what that bond would include, as well as elementary technology. More details obviously would come out on that as the timing is solidified, and one of the main factors right now is Dana's also leading an energy audit of the schools to understand whether there are other ways we can achieve energy savings, and if we can, that may play into what we do or don't do with a bond proposal. So that will be coming. Those were the major items from the meeting. The board got notes on the other minor items as well. That brings us to our Keeler Light presentation. And Dana, you're going to run the slideshow. I'm going to actually, so we have a slide presentation. I'm going to pretty much read through it because there's a lot of material, and I want to make sure everybody can hear it, and hopefully you could see it. I know it is, some of it, the first few pages are charts, so they're a little small to read, but you could just roll it out sort of by bullet, Dana. So this is the culmination of a lighting pilot that we undertook at Keeler Field during March, April, and May of this year. And what the Facilities Committee had committed to was to present to the board our findings from that pilot, both in terms of what we heard from the community and what our thoughts are going forward. And so the pros and cons of the program, how we felt about it, and I would ask anyone on the committee just to jump in at any point, particularly when we're talking about recommendations, because I think it's good for the board to hear the flavor of what we've discussed, and hopefully I've captured it. So on the first slide, you could see this is the number of emails with comments that were received by the Board of Education each week during the pilot. And so the first week of the pilot was March 23rd to March 29th. The pilot did run for a total of 10 weeks. The number of weeks of actual use was 8, so the board had approved 10 weeks, but spring break, the lights were not in use, and the pilot ended a week early with respect to the lighting. So for a total of 8 weeks, the number of practices, the number of nights that practice actually occurred under the lights was 20. For those 20 nights, the lights were run for a few hours, and practice was held by the Soccer Association. There were an additional 2 or 3 nights of short-term lighting that were used to set up and tweak the lights as the program progressed. Importantly, this presentation is based on what we received as a board. So the records that we have that go into the Board of Ed email were summarized in the presentation. As you all know, or many people know, there were also other comments given at the field. Board members were at the field during the pilot. There was, conversations with Peter Franks from the WSA. Those specific conversations aren't reflected in here. They can't be. I wouldn't possibly know of all of them. But I did want to capture what was submitted to the Board of Ed as a basis to show, what we received. Certainly what we received is reflective of the other comments. My point is that there were more comments than just received by the board. I think that's important to note. On the second slide, so actually just by week, we went from 48 comments the first week, and it winnowed down as the weeks went by. But the comments nonetheless were important and to understand, which we'll get into. So on the second slide, the number of emails with comments received by the board by home. So 18 homes submitted emails with comments to the board during the pilot. All but one of those homes, with the first home with the 30 comments, were on property that adjoins the blocks bordering the Board of Ed property. So that means your home was right up against the field or right across the street from the field on the four sides. 94 emails with comments were received by the board from those 18 homes. And what I did was, if there was a comment to the board that said, hey, can you look at this? And we said yes, and we kind of went back and forth. I included that as one comment because truly it was one comment that was just being handled. In July, the Facilities Committee met with a group of neighbors from each of the blocks bordering the Board of Ed's property and with representatives from the Westfield Soccer Association to review a draft of this presentation. And after the July meeting, 5 additional comments were sent to the board voicing similar concerns to what you'll see in this presentation. So I just wanted to note that we did get those additional comments to everyone over the summer. The next slide shows the nature of comments received by the board, categorized by type during the pilot. So comments relating to lights, there were 62, noise 38, miscellaneous, which there were 31, and smell from the generators 4. Examples of miscellaneous included just questions of who was the independent monitor, what are your success criteria, how do we reach the independent monitor, we see traffic safety concerns, how are we benefiting the high school. There was hay around the generators at one point for noise reduction, and there were comments that there was a concern about a fire generating from the hay. That didn't happen, but the concern was that it could. And again, these were emails. The reason there are so many more comments than emails is that obviously one email could have multiple comments. So I didn't like the light, I didn't like the noise, I didn't like, you could just, you could have several comments, and I wanted to capture them all in graphic form. So going into more, away from the charts and into more substance, I wanted to start with the unexpected problems that we encountered during the program, during the pilot. So the first was just on day one, a false complaint. So on the first night of practice under the pilot program, a false complaint was called in by a neighbor using a false name. That raised questions about integrity of future complaints. I don't really have much to say about that other than it's just frustrating, and we take all comments at face value, and learning that one just was a little disheartening. The second unexpected problem was a lawsuit was filed, which, although baseless and ultimately dismissed, impeded open communication between the board and neighbors for the majority of the pilot. Changes to the pilot, which may have been useful, were not requested due to the cost while the lawsuit was pending. The WSA did, however, continue to remediate comments received by the board during this period of time. So those who were involved in this will remember that there was a lawsuit over the pilot. And you'll remember if you emailed the board after the initiation of that lawsuit, the response you got back from the board was along the lines of, "I'm sorry, we can't reply, but a lawsuit was filed over this matter and we're no longer commenting." But I think what was important was that Peter Franks and the Westfield Soccer Association did continue to get those comments from us. We continued to pass them on, and he and the Soccer Association continued to remediate to the best of their ability. And I'll also note that each night of the pilot, board members were present at the Kaler Field and took comments from residents and saw Peter's work and saw what was going on around the area. The next sort of unexpected problem were allegations made that the town and the Board of Education somehow conspired to ignore residents, which, while again baseless, detracted from open conversation regarding the pilot. So again, that's just another unfortunate thing that, when you have those kind of discussions going back and forth, it makes it a little harder to actually have meaningful conversations. And again, I'm just sort of telling you what we experienced as a committee. The next unexpected problem, residents expressed a concern the pilot was really a step toward permanent lighting and night football games, and therefore any lighting, whether intrusive or not, was unacceptable. Although the board publicly discussed that the pilot program was not intended to be a suitable basis to evaluate permanent lighting, complaints based on this concern detracted from complaints specific to the pilot program itself. And I think the frustration there was that some people just don't want lighting, and they believe that, or have a real concern that it will turn into night football games. And their comments to us were I appreciate, quite frank, of, I don't want anything because it's just a step in the next direction. And while we appreciate that, it made it a little hard to have back and forth conversations about what we were trying to do, because the only end goal at that point that was seen was that we somehow wanted to have games lit under lighting. So again, just another frustration for us. Last unexpected problem that I'll point out, and then get into the next area. Neighbors identified a concern during our July meeting in that they felt sufficient public notice was not provided regarding public board discussions of the pilot. The committee noted that the original announcement regarding the lights was reported in the Westfield Leader based on statements made by town officials and before the committee had ever discussed or met regarding the proposed lighting pilot. This prompted the committee to ask the WSA to present their proposal to the full board at the next board meeting to be held 4 days later, and noted that no action was to be taken at that board meeting because public input was not likely. Consideration will be given in the future to more explicitly listing items on our agenda where appropriate. Dana, thank you. I know tonight you specifically listed the Keeler Lighting Program on the agenda, and we will endeavor to do that on future agendas, not just for this topic, for any topic. And it was a surprise to us when the story came out in the Leader. I think residents didn't realize that at the time, that sort of drove some of this, and we moved through it the best we could. Which brings us to factors to consider in evaluating the pilot. And I do want to point out these are just in the order that we listed them. No one factor was dispositive. or necessarily more important or less important than any other. So one factor was, did high school teams benefit from the pilot? The committee in the end evaluation was that there was little to no benefit observed for high school teams. We did hear from the athletic director that one reason for that was that the pilot began later than requested. So we understand that, recognizing that overall we didn't feel that high school specific teams benefited from the pilot program. Our next question was whether students benefited, did students benefit other than through high school sports? And our takeaway on that was that students playing soccer, yes, through more, absolutely benefited through more practice time, earlier practice times, not having the need to travel out of town to go to soccer practice, and a reduced density of practice players practicing on a field at any one time. So with more capacity, they had were able to have smaller practice sessions on not only Keeler but the other fields as well. Lacrosse. So our lacrosse did not participate, so obviously the benefit of light for lacrosse was not observed. You may recall that initially at the beginning of the pilot, we believed that soccer and lacrosse would be using the lighting. We did note that other user groups did also benefit. As just some examples, the YMCA Flyers track team were out there many nights practicing under the lights, and adults just simply walking around the track under the lights. We viewed as a benefit. Getting into other factors, did 4 generators violate any legal sound limit? We know from the litigation, and we knew going into this, the answer to that is no. But the next question is, despite meeting legal requirements, was sound obtrusive to neighbors? And if so, could modifications be made to decrease the sound? And our takeaway there was that some neighbors did complain about sound. The WSA continued to mitigate sound by, one, having the equipment provider add a better muffler systems to the units, by surrounding generators with bales of hay, by changing the placement of generators, by not always running all generators, and using generators only during the times required. We did note what neighbors noted to us, which is that during our July meeting, that these changes were, they noted during our July meeting that these changes were helpful, but also noted that as the weather got warmer and more windows were opened, the sound was more apparent. And it was noted by the neighbors that loud sounds were not as concerning as the lower level consistent sounds that were heard most loudly in May. They noted that May seemed to be louder than March and April.
Was that really the generators, Rich? Is that what they were talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Another factor with respect to the generators was just to note that due to the litigation filed, the Facilities Committee did not discuss during the pilot requiring broader changes that may have been more expensive to implement, such as quieter or fewer generators. So as I mentioned, when the lawsuit was filed, we didn't require changes to the program. By the time the pilot was actually over, by the time that lawsuit was dismissed. The next factor considered, again, not in any particular order, was the question of whether the lighting violated any legal requirements. And again, the court told us the answer to that was no. But the committee's question to itself and to the board was, despite meeting legal requirements, was lighting obtrusive to neighbors? And if so, could modifications be made to decrease light spillage? So again, some neighbors complained about lighting. The WSA continued to mitigate light in several ways. One, adding mesh to fences in other areas. 2, redirecting lights. 3, using fewer than all 4 light heads per generator. And 4, revising the height of lights. And 5, moving generators to different positions. So I know that Peter and other members of the WSA were out there trying to do several things on many nights, trying to be responsive to neighbors' concerns. Due to the litigation filed, again, the committee did not discuss requiring broader changes that may have been more expensive to implement, but which might have resulted in less light spillage, such as very simply requiring light shielding put on the lights. And again, the pilot was over by the time the lawsuit was dismissed. Neighbors did note during our meeting in July that the nature of the lights allowed a 180-degree spillage, which is hard to contain and that given the differing levels of terrain and the angles of the lighting, mesh on the chain link fence does not block all the lighting. So that was, again, good feedback. We had heard it and tried to remediate it during the pilot. But again, the neighbors felt that the nature of those lights was just too dispersed into the neighborhood. The next factor that we considered were safety issues created by crossing the streets. The Facilities Committee observation was no. The WSA had a plan and had parents to help with crossing. We did note that there were concerns about safety that were driven by other user groups. So I think that is something that we would need to be mindful of. It's one thing that the WSA had committed to have people crossing, and they did have that, but we did receive complaints about safety, and we did follow up with the WSA and determined that the people in those instances actually weren't the WSA, they were other organizations. Another factor considered was whether additional litter resulted from the pilot. Our observation with respect to those participating in the pilot was no. The next parameter we looked at was, did illegal parking occur from those participating in the pilot? Our observation was no. Neighbors did question during the July meeting whether there were more non-soccer related cars as a result of the pilot, so that's certainly something to look at, whether traffic in general was increased because there are other users as well, and we can be mindful of that. But we believe that with respect to the WSA itself, they had a good plan to have people park across the street. They had people crossing the players, and we felt they were responsive in that regard. And then generally, was the Westfield Soccer Association responsive? Our opinion is yes. Mr. Franks was attentive to emails placed to the board. He provided daily updates to the board as to the status of comments, so he did email the board. The full board got those emails, and they could be compared to the comments that we received directly from residents. So we knew that things were being monitored and attended to the best of his ability. Mr. Franks and multiple representatives of the WSA were present at the field almost all nights, and other representatives of the WSA were available when Mr. Franks was unavailable, which I believe were very few nights in my experience being at the field. Mr. Franks continually sought to mitigate issues raised. I believe that was universally noted by any board member at the field and by many residents, that whether they agreed with the outcome or not, they did believe that Mr. Franks was attentive to trying to remediate the concerns they raised. So before I get into recommendations, I just want to go through quickly what changes we would consider if lights were requested in the future. And this is just based on the comments we received at the time. So things that we might consider prior to making recommendations. Whether starting earlier in the year would make a difference. So in connection with the comments and the timing of noise and how the noise got worse as the weather got better, residents aren't outdoors and windows are closed in colder weather. That was just a sort of an obvious observation. Whether a program should be ended earlier in the spring. We could remove the lights earlier in May. Allowing only 1 or 2 generators would reduce noise. Requiring more shielding on light fixtures to further reduce light spillage. Possibly raising the height of lights and requiring more downward direction to further reduce spillage. Adding additional mesh to fences and other areas or other forms of light blockage. So you can kind of see how those things track the comments and complaints that we received over time as to areas we should be thinking about if this were to go forward. And again, that'll go into the recommendations in a moment. During our meeting with neighbors in July, it was requested that if a future lighting program is considered, that the end time at night be shortened to take into account younger students live in the area, and that the frequency of nights be considered for reduction. One thought that was proposed, just for thought, was whether it would be better to end at 8 p.m. 5 nights a week rather than ending at 9:45 p.m. for 3 nights a week. So that's something that could be considered if this moved forward. We haven't considered it. I mean, we're going to give recommendations, but that would be something that if someone were to propose a future program, people could give input on as to whether they thought that more lights but earlier stopping of the lights would benefit in any way. Also, during our meeting in July, neighbors noted changes that should be made to the area regardless of whether there's lighting, and those included, for example, yellow striping certain specified curb areas to prevent parking. I know we did some of that since that meeting. Non-WSA user groups need to be better monitored for noise and activities. We agree with that, and that's in the recommendations. Consider more plantings and take note of plantings that have died over time for various reasons. Do not allow non-student programs such as community-based boot camps to start before 8 a.m. Limit the use of the PA system and the content during permitted uses. Consider a better combined use of natural shielding and mesh. And keep the area cleaned up in any case, as it is a beautiful area when properly maintained. So that was just some of the direct feedback from the neighbors. During our meeting with neighbors in July, the Westfield Soccer Association noted that March is the most important month to have lighting from their perspective, and that once a practice schedule is set, it is impractical to change it. So that made sense as well from our perspective. Which brings us to the committee's recommendations to the board if future requests are made. So these are the things that, if these recommendations are taken into account in future proposals, the committee would look favorably on a proposal in recommending it to the board. And from the board members' perspective, I would ask you as we go through this, if you need clarification, to please speak up, or if there are other things you think should be on there or shouldn't be considered, to please note those, so that we're all of agreement as to what is important to consider.
This program was only 4 nights a week, right? We didn't run it on Fridays.
I thought it was 3 nights a week, and it was generally a combination of Monday, Wednesday, Friday. But it was 3 nights a week. It could have been some Thursdays instead of Fridays.
Oh, is that right?
But
Originally, it was supposed to be 5 with lacrosse,
Right, with
taking
lacrosse.
advantage of it, but they didn't need to use the lights.
Yeah, I thought they were the ones on Fridays that we didn't do.
Fridays and I believe Tuesdays or
Okay.
Wednesdays, one or the other.
Yeah.
Monday,
So
Wednesday, Thursday.
Monday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Got it, okay. So this was not a full week. This is all based upon, it really wasn't a full week's use throughout the life of the
Yeah.
pilot,
If you go
right?
back to that first slide, you don't have to go back, Dana. But Chris, if you just on the first slide, there were 10 weeks in the pilot, 8 weeks of actual use, and then the number of nights practice actually occurred was 20.
That's what I was trying to figure out. I thought
Right.
there was
So
30
over 8
yes,
weeks,
okay.
it's 3 nights a week would be 24.
24,
So
it's 20
obviously
out of
some weeks
24.
didn't even have 3 nights
Right.
of usage.
Got it.
Right. All right, so just to note on the committee recommendations, in making its recommendations, the committee was frustrated, as I noted earlier, by the fact that several of the things it had hoped to learn during the pilot were not tested due to the lawsuit that was filed against the board. The committee's recommendation for future requests attempts to capture the information we had hoped to capture during the pilot, and I think that'll become a little more clear as I roll out these recommendations. So the first one is that the committee recognized that the pilot was beneficial during all weeks of use. In order to minimize neighborhood impact in warmer weather, however, the committee recommends that any future requests be limited to March and April. So if there were a future request, one requirement would be that it not include the month of May. And that, we believe, is responsive to, while there were concerns all 3 months, we believe that is responsive to what we heard said as it seemed worse in May, and we link that to people being outdoor more and windows being open more. That's just our recommendation based on the feedback. The second recommendation is that the committee recognized that the sound generated by the pilot was legally permissible. In order to minimize neighborhood impact, however, any future request must include a plan to further reduce noise generation. This could include, for example, the use of only 1 or 2 generators. The committee does not recommend permitting the use of the same 4 generators as used during the pilot. So that's our way of saying that if you can do this quieter, we would recommend it to the board, but you can't come back with the 4 same generators. And it was interesting to us to note, well, I'll speak for myself, it was interesting to me to note that if you were there when the generators were turned on and turned off, if there was only 1 generator on, you could walk across the field and by the time you were on the other side, have lost sight of that sound. So there has to be better placement of generators and also fewer generators that can reduce overall noise to the field and to the neighborhood. That's our takeaway from the comments and from being there. and from listening. So whether that means one generator or two generators, I don't know. I do know there are bigger, better generators that are more quiet. I do know they're more expensive, and I do know the committee wasn't going to require that while there was a lawsuit underway, because we weren't going to make the WSA go spend money only to tell them to then go move the generator, remove the generator, if that's what the judge came back and told us to do. The next recommendation, the committee recognizes that the lighting configuration utilized during the pilot was legally permissible. In order to minimize neighborhood impact, however, any future requests must include a plan to further reduce light spillage. This could include, for example, light shielding and different light positioning such that the light is more focused down into the field. The committee does not recommend permitting the use of the same lights used during the pilot without modifications. The committee recommends that fewer light heads be used, but is not adverse to the same number of light heads if shielding is effective. So in connection with having fewer generators for less noise, we'd require that there be fewer light heads, or if it's the same number of light heads, a direct way to reduce light spillage. And this again gets into the cost issue. There are ways to reduce light spillage that are costly that we would have asked the WSA to utilize, but again, weren't going to ask the WSA to do because we didn't know if the court was going to tell them to remove everything in the first instance. So any future request will have to, if it would have to come back with some way to show us that, as the neighbor said, the light heads permit 180-degree lighting. That doesn't work for us. So it's going to have to be directionally more straight down on the field. The next thing that we, in our recommendations, was that the committee recognized that permitting lighting until 9:40 p.m. 3 nights per week was beneficial to user groups, but the committee recommends that any future proposal be required to include a description of pros and cons to limiting the lights to an earlier end time, even if more nights are used, if usage were requested. So we did hear from the neighbors recognizing they prefer no lights. There were comments that, well, why not earlier turning off the lights? And so that's something we need to balance against what the WSA, whether that the impact that has on the WSA. If they were to tell us that 5 nights at 8 p.m. Works for them as opposed to 3 nights at 9:40, and the neighbors felt that were better, we might be inclined to more favorably. We may be more favorably disposed to that configuration. Again, recognizing the neighbors may not want lights at all, but at least if there is a program to try to identify what the best parameters are. And so we would need something in that regard in any future proposal. The committee recommends that any future user be required to ensure mesh or other suitable screening is in place on fencing and bleachers similar or better than that provided during the pilot. The committee further recommends leaving the existing mesh in place. So a couple things there. The mesh, we felt that the mesh was helpful. It wasn't, as we heard from some residents, it didn't eliminate light. It did ameliorate or help the situation. Our recommendation to the board would be that any proposal would have to have that mesh in place before the pilot began. So the way it worked in this spring was to have some mesh was in place, but then more mesh was added, and more mesh was added, and it was moved as complaints came in. And now knowing where we are at this point, that would be at least a starting point to have that mesh up and in place before any lighting was put in place. The next recommendation by the committee recommends that any request for temporary light usage be presented to the business administrator no later than 6 weeks before the proposed date of use. Important to note, though, that the approval process may take far longer than 6 weeks. So that was just something as a way to say to people, don't come to us at the last minute and ask us to talk about or vote on a lighting proposal. So make sure any request is in by 6 weeks before a request, and recognize that the board meets once or twice a month, and any proposal would have to be vetted by the board and discussed in public meetings. The committee has discussed with the athletic director the need for her to hold a meeting of all user groups desiring the use of Keeler Field to review the standards of usage. Failure to follow such standards would be grounds to deny future usage. The committee recommends that such meeting occur this fall. So this is one that we've already talked to our athletic director, Sandy Mamery, about. She's enthusiastic about getting the meeting underway, and we believe it will produce good results because, quite frankly, we get similar complaints over and over again, and Sandy knows what they are and can lay them out there, and user groups that don't want to comply can find another facility in the Facilities Committee view. That's our recommendation to the board. The committee recommends that only gym classes, classroom activities, and the district's sports programs be permitted on the field before 8 a.m. any day of the week. Individual use of the track, however, would still be permitted earlier, provided no noise is created. So this was trying to be responsive to concerns we heard from neighbors that, and particularly I think in the summer or warmer weather, that there are third-party groups that use the field for their own purposes. So this is not just simply walking around for exercise. This is user groups out there. And we do allow people to enjoy the use of the field, and it's good that it's used, but we do want to limit that to 8 a.m., and we will limit that to 8 a.m. The committee recommends, our next recommendation, the committee recommends that the use of the PA system be limited to adults only, and when used by non-school groups, no music be permitted over the PA system or on the field, with one exception in connection with limited game time performances. As an example, cheerleading during the game, and loss of use would result for failure to follow these guidelines. And again, that was another one that, Sandy knows has been a concern over time. The Facilities Committee, the board know it's been a concern, and we've talked about it just being the end. So those are the limitations on usage by non-school groups. Sandy knows that, the groups know that, and we have a full expectation that that will be adhered to, or their permitted use will end. The committee recommends the installation of cameras in response to reported vandalism to such things as soccer nets, PA booths, fencing, and gate locks, among other things. We had an email the other day about a sign being damaged and damage to a bench, I believe. But the point is, we will put cameras up there to view the situation on off hours. During the pilot, board members were available on site to observe the program. The committee recommends that any future user must have a system to intake, respond to, and report to the business administrator on a daily basis any comments from residents regarding the lighting on field usage, such that the business administrator is appropriately able to update the board on an ongoing basis. So, one of the things that we liked about the communication process was we did have emails coming in from the public, but we also had a requirement that Mr. Franks report daily to the business administrator, which emails also went to the full board then, about what they saw and heard, and board members could then look at that and make a conclusion as to whether we were hearing everything, because we were hearing it directly from residents, and we were hearing it then directly from Peter as to what he was hearing and what he was doing. And as I said, in our opinion, those two things jived in terms of information and what was being done. Additional recommendations. The committee recommends that the prohibition on night games by user groups be continued. Temporary lighting must sufficiently support and is intended only for practice by user groups. A program, event, or game run under the authority of the athletic director may, however, take advantage of such lighting to complete any such activity, provided the activity was originally scheduled for completion during daylight hours. So that would be a situation where Sandy has a daytime track meet, and the last two events or whatever, are into the darkness, and the lights are there. We'll let her turn them on, but it doesn't mean she can actually schedule things later than she already does. It's just to be helpful. And I say we recommend the prohibition on night games by user groups be continued. As I mentioned earlier, that was sort of an unforeseen problem that came up, that I know neighbors don't believe that we're not moving toward night games, so I'm just laying it out there. I mean, our recommendation is that the prohibition continue, implying that it's in existence already. We're not trying to move away from that or take it away. The next recommendation, the committee recommends that the athletic director have the ability to permit the short-term usage of lighting in very limited circumstances solely for activities under her authority and not for third-party user groups, which may include, for example, field lighting for football practices in the postseason should the team continue to play into postseason play. So, excuse me, obviously those are what we view as, you know, favorable scenarios. These aren't things that Sandy is planning to do. These aren't situations where she's planning to light up the field. These are situations where, hey, our teams have done really well. They've gone into postseason. They need somewhere to keep practicing so they can continue to play well in the postseason. And our view as a committee is that's going to be last minute. We're telling you now, Sandy, you can do that, is our recommendation. The next recommendation is that the committee recommends that the administration look for ways to provide additional plantings around the field, whether through donations, approaching landscapers, discussions with organizations such as the Boosters, etc., and to look for ways to properly irrigate such plantings. So my understanding is one of the reasons that the plantings died is because we no longer have a sprinkler system out there. So we do need to remediate that or understand what we can plant out there and how we can water it to keep it alive. And that's something that we need to work on. The committee, next recommendation, which looks like the last recommendation, the committee recommends engaging in dialogue with the town in an effort to jointly explore establishing additional turf field capacity in the near term so that outstanding user groups do not require the use of Keeler Field to the extent currently required. The committee recommends that temporary lighting not continue if more turf capacity is established elsewhere in town. It was important to the committee to note that this is helping to solve a problem that exists in the town with respect to turf field capacity, but it is a school facility and it is in a neighborhood, and our preference would be to have a town solution that takes this away from Keeler Field. And that's our hope. That's a discussion we want to help drive. I know I read recently in the Leader that those conversations are continuing. We want to become part of them and try to help find the right solution, because the notion of having a pilot every year in our mind is not the right solution. The town needs to find the right solution for the community as a whole. Thank you for sitting through that. It was lengthy, but it was the result of a lot of input from a lot of people, and thank you to the neighbors for your input, not only during the pilot, but during the summer, and no doubt ongoing, because it is important. Let me turn to the board member. Well, let me turn to the facilities committee first to see if you want to make any comments on this. I think it was pretty self-explanatory, and it was input from all of you, but if you think anything needs emphasis, and if not, I'll just turn to the board members in general for comments or questions.
I just want to take the opportunity to thank everybody who put in the time and the effort here, whether it was the WSA, Rich, Brendan, everybody who was down at the field. Definitely time was put in to look at this situation to the best of our ability, and I think you did a very, very thorough presentation of everything that was discussed at the meetings. And I know it's a difficult, situation that many people like and don't like, but just from a fact basis, I think it was an amazing job and, an amazing effort put out by all.
Thank you.
Go ahead,
Katie?
At the end of our last facilities meeting, we did talk about what defines success. And while we couldn't really come up with parameters in each of these areas that we talked about, we did talk about the idea that success could be based on providing additional time and a local location for children's sports practice activities. So notwithstanding the categories of concern,
Right.
we did focus on, for an overall sense, what would be success if we could manage it in a small way.
Right, that's a good point. Thank you.
Yeah,
Chris?
Rich, I was going to mention during the liaison reports that the town rec committee, it's probably more appropriate to say it here, has been exploring trying to turf some of the fields at Tamaulipas with the
Right.
idea that this may alleviate the strain that we feel for our sports teams. So they are moving forward with those plans. It's on, still to be determined whether they'll be successful or not, but that is something the town is looking into.
Right, no, that's great, I had read that as well, and I know they have some more flexibility than us to try to do something like that. So
Yes.
it's good they're pursuing it, because it is one town and it's all the same kids. They happen to be in our school system, but, they use the fields, they use
Right.
all the fields.
And they're trying to pick an isolated area where any noise and traffic would be
Right.
removed from, our residents.
Right, thank you.
I did have a private conversation similar to that, and I just fell into it with Jim Gilday the other day. And it was basically that Rec Commission is starting to investigate. They put some experts together to give them some information about areas of town property that could be useful. They're focusing in on Tamaulipas Lot 4, or Field 4 at the moment. I asked him to please make sure that whatever discussions took place focused on a regulation size field that would provide
Right.
competitive sport events, so that it would be larger and would not be a practice field, but it could be used as a practice field, but it would absolutely be available for competition. He said that there were, although limited, there were a number of areas within the town that could be considered for investigation.
Good.
And he will be in touch with you.
Great,
You should be in touch with him.
yep, no, I will do that, I look forward to that conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I just have one other comment. Throughout the recommendations that you put forth, there were a lot of things that the neighbors and the people in that neighborhood brought to our attention. And you discussed possibly putting up cameras so that we can be a little bit more aware of some of the things that go on at the field, which I think is a great idea. Once again, it's a budget type issue, but I want to open the dialogue for if things go on at the field. I know I'm not there all the time. We do want your feedback as to if people are not abiding by some of the things that are in these recommendations, because we cannot be there 24/7. So, that's why I think some of them were put there for us and for you to give us feedback in reference to what goes on in the field when we're not there.
Yeah, at the committee table, we talked about other towns who have limited access field permissions. Some towns that we compete with will have fences and locks and only allow individuals on fields in very controlled circumstances. We've always had open access in this community with identification signs, some cautionary, don't walk dogs on the field. Signs tend to get removed, and people tend to make their own judgments sometimes about use of facilities. But I think that the committee understands that open access has its value within our community itself is used to that, and we want to continue individual responsibility in that regard. So, short of changing to restricted access, we have to try to manage field use and protect our fields through individual responsibility and identifying as much as we can a moral code or an obligation to take care of the field and not misuse it or not misuse the opportunity to be there for the sake of the field and for the neighborhood.
Thank you. Brendan?
Yeah, I was out there pretty much every night.
Thank you.
And the pilot it was all trial and error. And every complaint that came in, we were adjusting something, and that caused another complaint to come in from a different direction. It was really well intentioned, but I don't think that's the way to go. If lights were to go forward, I'd suggest that some kind of professional engineering or lighting design be done that tells exactly where the lights are going to go with parameters that are established ahead of time to ensure that light spillage doesn't occur. I know it's another cost, but they make taller light poles. You know, there's lots of things
Right,
that could
absolutely.
go into it.
Right.
But that's something you don't want to be swapping equipment in and out during a short season.
Right.
So you don't want to bring in using the equipment that we had last year. I wouldn't suggest under any circumstances going forward again. We just couldn't make everybody happy. And there were legitimate complaints. There were a couple nuisance complaints, but you know there were people whose bedrooms were illuminated, regardless of what we did. But with professional engineering and controls and the right kind of equipment, a lot of that could be mitigated.
Yeah.
But that's a lot longer than a 6-week lead time to get that.
And, yeah, no, I know. I noted that, and I hope it came through that the committee isn't recommending the use of the same equipment, in fact.
Yeah. No, it
Quite
was clear.
Yeah,
Just
okay. But I agree with you, and whether it's an engineer or I think what you're saying is just literally set it up in advance before you ask for approval. And you can show us what it does.
right. But with something, you know, so you're not bringing in the wrong kind of equipment. Oh, well, it's
Right.
already here. Let's just keep using it.
No, I think you're saying before it's even approved. So if it's not
Yeah.
approved, it's not approved.
Mhm.
There's no implicit, oh, it's here, you can keep it.
That and regardless of what we do going forward, really need to fix the plantings going all the way around, particularly where the mesh is along the Lincoln School property.
Yeah.
Put some plants up. You'll get the same green and it won't look so tacky.
Right. Thank you. Anyone else on the board? All right, I'll open up to the public. I know Peter Franks is here as well. You're welcome to comment if you'd like, or answer questions if people have them. But anyone who wants to speak, please just come to the podium. Again, just state your name and address for the record.
My name is Marie Koch, 531 Washington Street, Westfield, New Jersey. I stand up in front of you wearing many hats. I'm a former student assistance counselor in this district, and I can tell you that I have had individuals in my office, similar to those 4 young students there, who can't balance what's going on in their life right now, and will never stand up to a coach that says you'll come to extra practices. I wear the hat of NCAA coordinator of officials for basketball and for field hockey, so I know what the demands are. I know what the requirements are to get into a good, solid school. I also ask you to think about this report. First of all, I want to thank members of the board. I know you are out there. I got calls. I know especially, thank you for your calls. But the fences, the mesh didn't help. And at what point do we talk about quality of life? In all due respect, the reports on 2 of the issues, lights and sound, are not what our legal counsel have agreed to. We believe we have a case for both sound ordinance and for light ordinance. I would also suggest to you, and I agree with the cameras, the report that's not up there is the calls to the police. The calls from parents or from neighbors. How about elderly neighbors who go out the next morning and they pick up condoms and beer cans and everything else after the lights go out? That's my neighborhood. And I've had a great relationship with this board and with this school district. I sat on the original committee. It's funny, I came in for the strategic planning. I sat on the committee that spoke for hours about one word, rigorous. We argued for hours about the word rigorous academic standards. You are a board of education. One component of that education, true, is athletics. One of the reports for the advancement of females was to balance IQ and EQ. But we're putting the skew over in the wrong direction. I ask you simply, and I encourage you, and I will volunteer to do anything I can to get on committees to find alternate facilities, alternate properties. But ladies and gentlemen, 9:30 at night, I don't care what the age is, read every bit of literature about the frontal cortex of the brain. Read about the fact that if those students from ages 4th grade on up through high school need 8 to 10 hours to be effective. But what do? No, we're in there early, aren't we? Please, we don't need an adversarial relationship. We need to work with each other for the benefit of the students, but I question whether the benefit of the students, and frankly, whether the benefit of me not being able to go to bed because that light is shining, and I sent pictures, no matter what they did to adjust. We have a great soccer program. We have many students who have gone on from the male and the female side. And it should be encouraged, as should all of our programs, all of our athletic programs. But there is a time and a place, and what we need to do is look at where our priorities are and what we need to do. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Laura Vasilowicz. I live at 715 Rawway Avenue, so I'm right next to the field. I just want to offer a slightly different perspective. I'm not agreeing or disagreeing with that. I certainly have nowhere near the expertise you have in childhood development and whatnot. But specifically in relation to the report we saw tonight, I feel that the recommendations were quite fair. I think they have addressed, if not all, almost all of the concerns that were raised by the neighbors throughout the process. And I think also what's important is we now have sort of a baseline. So as long as we keep improving every time, we improve the noise issue, we improve the light issue, we improve any concerns of safety or whatnot, I think each successive iteration of this, if there are successive iterations, will be more and more successful. And I also hope that if the WSA chooses to propose this again, that they find they can still be successful within the parameters that have been recommended by the committee. So thank you all.
Thank you. Anyone else? Sure, please.
My name is Jean Lemberg. I live at 528 Grove Street, and I also would like to say thank you for all of the work that went into preparing this report. What I want to say isn't specific to the lights, but you did bring it up in this report, so I wanted to mention the PA system. One of the recommendations was that the PA system only be used by adults. I can tell you that even with adults using it, with all my windows closed on Sunday morning, I can be inside and I hear it, and it starts at 8 o'clock in the morning. It's the PAL, and in the spring season, the track. So I think that while that's a good suggestion, and I'm really glad that this has been brought out into the open and that you're now aware of the PA system, that there needs to be, Brendan had mentioned a lighting engineer, perhaps somebody that's expert in sound could adjust and also provide some suggestion to the people who are in there, because they have no idea. My husband's not able to be here this evening, but there have been numerous times when we've walked around the corner, gone up in the booth and said, could you please turn it down? And sometimes we've been met with a nasty response, depending on who's there, and sometimes the people would say, we have no idea, because they're inside and they don't know. And it really, I've been on the field, and you can barely hear it on the field, and yet you can hear it in my yard, you can hear it, like I said, inside my house, and my walls are 12-inch thick. I live in a very old house, so stone walls, so that was one thing. And the other thing that I would ask, and it's also related to third-party users, and that is the fact that because of the way that the track is situated, it's skewed so that it is close to the Washington Street side. And on the Grove Street side, the properties that, the end of the field that backs up to the Grove Street properties, there's a lot of practices take place, PAL, whatever third-party user is there, track, and they're right on the property line. And so you can be in your backyard and you have people, infringing on your private space. We have on occasion, I've looked out the window and unfortunately have seen young men, they think that nobody is seeing them because they're turning their back to the field, but they're actually urinating onto the property line. So if they could only, most recently when I noticed it, in terms of the practice being right up against the property line, that was just how their coaches were, and they were talking very loud, but there was space in between. They're not temporary bleachers, I guess they're metal bleachers, and like Rawway Avenue. So if they just move, I think there's, I'm not sure if it's a shot put, there's something for track during the spring, but if they just moved the orientation, same thing with the Westfield Flyers, they're always like right against Grove Street when there's space on Rawway Avenue that wouldn't impact Laura. It's at our end. And then the other thing was that when you do have a landscaper looking into it, you need to be aware that there's black walnuts. I think my husband mentioned it, but I didn't see it in the report.
No idea, though. I was grateful he mentioned it.
Yeah, there are, it's a natural herbicide, but there are plants that are immune to it. But you have to have a landscaper that knows. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Well, again, I would thank everyone for coming out, not only tonight, but through the pilot, whether by email or in person. It was appreciated and very helpful. Thank you.
Good job, Rich.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good for you some water.
Yeah, I was dying for a point.
I did, but I don't think he saw.
I didn't see it. That brings us to long-range planning. Ginny?
I have no comment tonight.
All right. That
I
brings
don't
us.
think. You do, right?
That brings us to policies. I know Lucy is out tonight.
I'm covering.
Oh, wonderful. Go ahead.
Yes, I've been informed that we have two items on the agenda. The first item, which is the homework policy, we are asking that that be tabled for the moment. The teachers would like an opportunity to make comments on the changes to the policy. So I'd ask for a second to table that proposal.
Second.
Thank you, Brendan. And I think we have to vote on that. Yes?
I think in all favor.
All in favor of tabling
Yes.
item one?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Should I bring up a comment that I have now that you could take back to teachers, or would you want to do the other vote?
Why don't you give it to Lucy, probably? Right?
Okay, I'll give it to Lucy.
Okay.
Well, you do.
Yeah,
want to
you
do
can
now?
see me after.
That's fine.
And item number 2, I'd like a second on this. I'll read it first. The board affirms the superintendent's decision on HIB incident 15E11 for the reasons set forth therein. May I have a second?
Second.
Chris.
We did need a second.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm missing in action. Any comments, questions? Okay, Dana.
Mr. Chadwick?
Yes.
Mark Friedman?
Yes.
Brendan Gallagher?
Yes.
Chris Linehardt?
Yes.
Jenny Lights?
Yes.
Gretchen Oleg?
Yes.
Peggy Oster?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Curriculum, instruction, and programs. Gretchen?
Yes, we, the SIP committee met earlier this month. It's always a nice intimate gathering. It's just Ginny and Peggy and I with Paul. And we actually didn't have any curriculum to review. We talked about the district goal that that Dr. Dolan went over tonight, and we saw the kind of the first draft of that. And we also talked about the curriculum, you know, what our schedule is going to look like this year. We have a meeting coming up next Thursday, I think. So we'll get the ball rolling then. In terms of tonight, I would just ask that the board approve the district trips that are attached as attachment 5. Can I have a second, please? Mark, thank you. Any questions or comments by anyone? Dana?
Rich Mutesek?
Yes.
Mark Friedman?
Yes.
Brendan Galligan?
Yes.
Chris Lineheart?
Yes.
Ginny Lights?
Yes.
Gretchen Oldig?
Yes.
Peggy Oscar?
Yes.
Nothing more.
Thank you. Mark, finance?
So we had a finance committee, I guess, last, 2 Fridays ago, I guess was the 11th, passed around notes to everybody. The 2 main topics that we discussed, Rich kind of addressed one already, and that's the timing of the bond. So we'll continue forward on that. We're waiting on some additional information from George Duthie, the architect. And then we'll have more information. We'll probably want to talk to the full board about timing and when we're going to be able to do the bond. The other conversation was around the end of the year closing of the books and fund balance and what that fund balance might be as an estimate. I don't think we're prepared at this point to talk about that in any detail, but kind of thinking about what we might have available and how those funds will be deployed. Generally speaking, those funds are used to, a portion is used to appropriate into a future budget, and then we deposit it into the various reserves that we've got, maintenance and capital reserve for future uses in the district. So I think once the audit is, well, I know once the audit is done, we'll be able to report back what that fund balance is and what the recommendation will be from the committee on how to deploy those dollars. Okay.
I just thought maybe before you move on, it's worth mentioning that we have a committee being gathered, some community members and some board members to specifically talk about the bond. So even though we don't have the timing worked out, we're going to try and pull all of our resources to get as much information out there as soon as possible. So we talked about that.
Yep. So that was the meeting. So I'd like the board to consider finance items 1 through 21. Second. Ginny, thanks. Just a couple of comments, number of donations. We'd like to accept the gift of a Herman Bayer cello valued at $500 from Ms. Pamela Orbach to the Westfield High School Music Department, and also a Baldwin upright piano valued at $2,500 from Mr. James Green to the Westfield High School Music Department, and also a gift of $800 from the Westfield Coalition for the Arts to provide clinician fees for Ms. Maureen Francis to work with the Westfield High School Concert, Choir, and Chorale. And then lastly, we'd like to accept the gift of $2,000 from the Westfield Coalition for the Arts to purchase 5 iPads for the music departments at McKinley and Lincoln schools. That's a good beat. Any questions? No? Okay. Dana?
Rich Mutesek?
Yes.
Mark Friedman?
Yes.
Brendan Galligan?
Yes.
Chris Lineheart?
Yes.
Ginny Lights?
Yes.
Gretchen Oldig?
Yes.
Peggy Oscar?
Yes.
Thank you. That's it.
Thanks, Mark. Legislation, Brendan?
No report.
Thank you. Technology, I know Mitch isn't here. I don't think he went through.
I have his notes from the technology meeting.
You want to just do a quick?
I can do
Sure.
a quick review. Technology Committee met on last Friday, September 25th. We had an update on summer work, 150 new laptops, the most this past summer, most paid for us too from PTOs. We replaced all 5th grade computers in the district. Fine arts teachers were given laptops. Cleaning and maintenance was done on existing computers. The Wi-Fi installation in the intermediate schools, Edison and Roosevelt, was accomplished this summer. Elm Street was also updated with know what. But Elm Street had some updates on portals, I guess, airports and Wi-Fi
And
accessibility.
access
points.
yeah.
There is one more project that we have money that's available to, and that will be Wi-Fi and internet access at the field house. We'll be wiring the press box, and that will give us live streaming of graduation from Kaler Field. So that's will be a very exciting prospect. And we have upgraded our phone servers.
Can you remotely control the PA with the worth looking into, yeah.
Yeah.
Virtual desktop applications are being deployed in a pilot process right now in the technology department, and we're awaiting feedback. We're talking about developing criterion as to how there will be a rollout to different supervisors and teachers for virtualization, and what that means for BYOD, students using their own devices within the classroom. That will be coming in a matter of time, but it will take time to have some conversations with teachers about what it means for them instructionally. How will they be able to use it? How will they accommodate it? How will it contribute to instruction? We had during the meeting 1,378 active uses of devices on our Wi-Fi system. 1,100 of those were in the high school, mostly iPhones. And that was something that our technology guys can actually see and track instantaneously. 825, this is 12 left. I'm not sure what that means. Okay. We have internal filters that are blocking access to websites and Genesis systems, so that we're talking about security, and when you have Wi-Fi available in a public setting like that, managing the back end of our security to data access. Let's see. Sorry. We have a Chromebook cohort of teachers, 7 teachers, which are run by Adam Peasy. In different departments, they're finding out what works and what doesn't work. They're looking at workflow rhythms, best practices. Writing process works well, comments being put dynamically into Google Docs. So we're investigating through different small groups how to best utilize some of the technology under what circumstances in what content areas to enhance instruction, but not to be but to be as minimally disruptive as possible and as efficient as possible. We are supporting teachers' enhanced instruction on cloud-based computing. English and social studies departments are specifically very excited and interested in trying to get their teachers invested in using the technology and understanding how it can benefit their instruction. Middle school teachers are very excited about finally having their infrastructure of Wi-Fi. Breaking news. For the elementary project, next summer we'll be doing our elementary Wi-Fi project installation, and through E-Rate, which is a state-run? Federal project of reimbursements, we will receive 40% of our hardware costs. Will save us about $155,000.
That would just need, that's going to require a little more conversation with the board, because
Okay.
right now we have it in the bond referendum, which would qualify for state aid, 40%.
Okay, so where it goes will be a question.
Yeah, right.
But-
The E-rate would not be applicable if we go through the bond
Okay.
referendum, but state money would then be available.
Okay, So regardless, we may have the opportunity to reduce that cost of rolling out our Wi-Fi into our elementary schools. And we may be able to reduce it by 40%, either through an E-rate use or state aid through a bond referendum. So we'll talk about where that best fits together.
All right, the report, thank you. I would ask the board to note the notes for the record. Ask whether there's any unfinished business. Any new business? Any liaison reports?
Right. I had 3 liaison reports. I'm the rep for Lincoln School, and I attended their opening day coffee. It was extremely enjoyable. There were many, many little adorable, cute people there, very happy. So I was able to see them all come in and get in their lines and so forth. Also, it was the first time that I was in Lincoln School, and it is an amazing facility. Lighting, the rooms, everything very bright, so that was a very nice thing for me to be part of. I also attended the first PTC meeting. It was purely just an organizational meeting for the beginning of the school year. They did change their structure to only meet once a month, so they'll have their president's meeting first for an hour, followed by their general membership meeting. And that happens on, I think, the 3rd Thursday of the month.
so,
I think
yes.
is the
Sounds
right
right.
day. Unfortunately, I had a conflict with the special ed committee, and I didn't attend their meeting, but hopefully next time I will have a report from them.
Right, I didn't know if you're gonna go on. I just would just say I attended the Jefferson PTO meeting. They also, it was fairly organizational, just getting ramped up for the year, talked about all their fundraising activities and the like. Nothing else to report.
Jenny?
I attended Union County School Boards Association meeting with Brendan and with Chris on September 16th. We heard a conversation on New Jersey Ethics Commission advisory opinions, and I circulated the information in the packet to all of you so that you can be advised. It was a well-attended meeting. I was happy that we had 3 representing us. Brendan is, I don't know if he's told you, he's the Vice President of Union County School Boards Association
Nice.
on the Executive Committee.
I responded to an email asking for more information, and they said, "Who signed you up?"
There's a moral to that story.
I volunteered.
So we hope to keep attending in the future, one or more of us. And then on September 18th, I attended Edison's PTO meeting. Again, organizational, I talked about our goals. They had some questions about funding, curricular changes, the 5-year plan, park influences, will the data be shared with students, with parents, baseline assessments. Principal Matt Bolton handled those very nicely. Talked about the potential for a bond referendum in the 3 categories of projects, the critical projects that we have identified for a bond, and I talked about the district goals, specifically the curriculum review and alternate sources of funding, including a director of development.
Chris?
I attended the town rec committee meeting on the 1st of the month, and we talked about the field expansion possibly at Tamacos, but they were also interested in knowing our schedule for maybe doing any work at Keeler Field on the field itself, and also track repair. So I will follow up with Dana on that as to maybe what our schedule and cost for that might be if it's planned. That's it.
They're offering to pitch in?
I'm kidding.
Moral support.
No comment.
Actually, as a follow-up on a facilities note, when I was talking to Jim Gilday, I did happen to ask him about Jefferson Field,
Right.
which we know has kind of been hanging out there as a will we or won't we question. He tells me that the piping has been reviewed and fixed, and is done. I didn't know.
I didn't either.
I know we were waiting
Under the field?
under the field. You don't think so?
I don't believe that.
I don't know when they would have done that.
That would mean that I would have seen a big hole in the ground.
Well, you know what? He tells me that there are 6-foot pipes and you can walk through them and they were cleaned out, and that's all I know is that this is what he told me. And I said, so do you think you're ever gonna do a reconstruction of the field or modification, revision, maintenance of it? The answer is probably not. Not gonna happen. I guess that might require a little follow-up.
They're replacing the jumbo gym.
There's a new one there now.
Yeah.
Just
Any
got
other
delivered
reports?
this week.
We'll end it on that one. I would then recognize the public for questions and/or comments on any matter. Seeing no one come to the podium, we do have a private session, so I'd ask the board to approve the following resolutions. Resolved that the Board of Education move into private session for the purpose of discussing a possible settlement of a lawsuit and a harassment, intimidation, and bullying incident. And it is further resolved that any discussion held by the board which need not remain confidential, and the results of the discussion will be made public as soon as practicable. Can I have a second? Ginny, thank you. Any comments or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, we're in private session. Everybody out.